Hey gang, Stoneman, Classic Rock 101.1 out here with the pilot, Tom Euing, of this lovely aircraft behind us, the B-17G.
G model.
G model. It was built in 1945 after World War II, so it couldn't have been used. But the sad thing was they were going to put it for scrap.
They were.
It turned into a photographic aerial platform. And then throughout the life of the aircraft, it did everything from more aerial photographic platforms to a crop duster. I can't imagine this aircraft being a crop duster.
I know.
And then the funniest one of all, it ferried cattle back and forth from Florida to Puerto Rico.
It did.
So how did you get a hold of this aircraft, and tell me about your love for the Aluminium Overcast?
Well, this particular plane, first off, you mentioned that it was an aerial sprayer. It did spray for fire ants, and there was
which could be used very much down here.
Oh, yeah. Well, and what they did, they mixed it with a linseed oil of some sort, and it turned out that after they finished doing the spraying with this thing, and they parked it, and it was sitting vacant behind I believe it's in Dothan, Alabama, sitting behind a building. It turned out that this linseed oil that was mixed with the fire ant agent saved the airplane. It permeated all the rivet lines and all the framework, and everybody thought this airplane was going to be completely rusted out and nothing left of it.
Right.
And then they went in it, and it turned out that this linseed oil had just permeated everything and protected it and preserved it and saved it. But you're right, this airplane did some things that were less than glorious. Other things, the aerial platform for photographing some of the high altitude Middle East high resolution photography for the Vietnam War, for instance, did a lot of that. We do this just to keep the history of the greatest generation alive. 12,731 of these were built, and it was essentially a 3.5-year period that all 12,731 of these were built. And 12,731 is just a number. To put it in perspective, you think of the commercial jet airliner that is built in greater numbers than any other airliner in history, Boeing 737. First flew in 1967. The 10,000th Boeing 737 was built in April. Okay, it's taken 51 years to build 10,000 737s. 12,731 of these were built in roughly a 3.5-year period. And they were all built in a short period of time, and by the end of World War II, these guys were being killed so fast. There were only 3,600 of these B-17s left at the end of World War II. That's all there were.
Well, a lot of people came familiar with this aircraft, not only the people who lived it. My parents grew up in the Battle of Britain over in London, so they heard about these aircraft growing up as kids. But the movie The Memphis Belle with Harry Connick Jr. brought this aircraft to the forefront and kind of put it into pop culture, if you will.
Yeah.
But this aircraft, to actually have the privilege not only to fly on it, but you flying it. When was the first time you actually took the stick of one of these?
I retired as a pilot for UPS 3.5 years ago, and
that's a good gig.
Oh, it was. It is. It was and is. Loved what I did for UPS for 3.5 decades, but there were things that were more fun awaiting.
Well, it's like the sports car. Let's go take a look at some of the aircraft. And what we're doing is we're walking around the B-17 here, and this thing is an unbelievable aircraft. You had the ball turret on the bottom, which was probably the scariest place to be on the aircraft, would you say?
None of them were safe, but you think about it, this is probably one of the safest places. Because number one, it's the only place that's armor plated on the entire plane. This is beer can.
That's just tin.
This is tin. This is armor plated, and it's round, so shells that would hit this would may deflect off of it before they would go in and kill anybody. Now, there was no safe place to be on these airplanes, but this was probably one of the scariest places, just from claustrophobia and being, basically out in the elements down here.
And you have to be a little person.
And you had to. We've put 6-footers in here, but you
Really?
wouldn't want to be. Well, you wouldn't want to be in there for an 8-hour mission. You really need to be a small person.
Now, with this aircraft, how long did it take to restore it to flying condition? and bring it to the condition of the original original Overcast, aluminum Overcast that was shot down in France.
You know, there's really no time frame you can put on that because it was a long process.
It's a love.
Well, it's a constant process of keeping it restored and up to date. But just the period of time that it took the original guys, Hal Weekly and his original folks that bought it, that saved it from the back of a building with linseed oil permeating its rivet lines. These guys, it took them a while to, over a period of years to restore it to viable condition.
See, one of the cool things is this weekend, while the Aluminum Overcast is here, you can actually fly on this. You can get a reservation to fly on this aircraft, and these guys will gladly take you up. But you take a look at the size of these engines that you don't see anymore on the modern day aircraft. Tell them a little bit about one of these engines that you see here.
These are 9-cylinder radial engines. This 1,200 horsepower, 9-cylinder radial engines, and this is the largest single-row radial engine that was ever made right here. They had many larger engines, but they were multiple rows of cylinders, the composite type engines. But this is the largest. It's a Wright 1820, 1,823 cubic inches.
It's got a little giddy up to it.
Oh, they do. We don't. They're turbocharged, supercharged. We don't use the turbochargers on them anymore. No need to. We're not flying it at 25,000 feet. But the superchargers are integral to the engine itself. They're gear-driven part of the engine. So yeah, they're still operating, and yeah, it's got some giddy up.
What's your favorite thing about flying this thing?
Just the history, just being part of something that is so iconic. So much a part of. When you think of why we're here, I mean, you can't just say part of World War II. It's why we're here right now and why we live in the world we do. Because if those guys in the Greatest Generation had not done what they did in World War II, we would be living in a very different world. So this airplane is just a small part of the Greatest Generation, and I'm just a very, very small part of this airplane.
Indeed.
And so it's such a huge part that I'm such a little small player in, but we have to keep that generation, the history of the Greatest Generation alive. We have to. It's a part of history that's going away. 3% of the entire world's population was killed in World War II.
And the lifespan of a crew member and a pilot on a B-17 back during World War II was how many missions?
Oh, it varied from, but roughly a third of these guys were not going to come back. And in the beginning of the war, think of so you've now been recruited. You're going over to a bomber group in England. You're going to show up in January of 1943.
Yeah.
The first thing that you're going to realize is that you've taken the bunk of somebody who didn't make it back.
Yeah.
And the person that guy took a bunk from is somebody that didn't make it back.
Yeah.
And you realize that you are one of a bunch of people that have not one single person has ever survived 25 missions in January of 1943.
Yeah.
The first plane that ever survived 25 missions was a B-24 called Hot Stuff, and that was in February of 1943. Everything prior to that, all the guys going over there, they're not coming home. They know it. They have a life expectancy of 8 to 12 missions, and they've got to do 25.
Yeah.
They know they're not coming home. Is today the mission I'm not coming home from? Is it going to be tomorrow, next week? But I'm not coming home.
The aircraft that you're hearing in the background is a sweet Gulfstream, a little bit different than the aircraft that we're flying on today, but the aircraft that you've got today has got to be an unbelievable experience. But then you look up here, and there's your office right there at the top.
Absolutely.
And when you got your office up there, from what you're used to flying with UPS is so completely different to what you've got in that aircraft.
Absolutely, yeah.
The aircraft today, this aircraft's going to be out here for the whole weekend?
Whole weekend.
And you can come out here, and if you want to check it out, come out here to the Runway Cafe. It's the Greenville Downtown Airport, and you got to come see this guy. This guy is a world full of knowledge. And the rest of the people that out here that have the love for the old World War II aircraft, let alone this one, You want to come ride in a B-17, you can do it this weekend. All you got to do is come out here to the Runway Cafe, have yourself a good time, and have a beverage after you get down, and these guys will tell you even more about it.
You bet.
What would be the best thing that someone that's never flown on one of these aircraft before, what would you say they need to do?
They need to come out here and they need to see the bomb bay and look at the view. They need to talk to us about the history, especially if you don't know anything about the history of World War II. It's something that you really need to experience and you need to know, and just to see how this airplane was such a part of it.
It is a major part of it. We're going to do a little flying with this with the captain over here in a few moments, and we'll do some more Facebook stuff coming up for you live from Classic Rock 101.1.